kind of, well, imperfections in the fossil record. And, it is very unique conditions for a fossil to form, or possibly what they would call punctuated equilibrium. Well, maybe everything stayed the same and then just, for whatever reason, would just happen to evolve really quick, so you didn't see the transitional form. Now, with biblical creation, I'll say most of the models, because they get different, but would say that, well, the fossils were formed primarily during the flood, and the order of burial was related to the order the habitats were destroyed. So, like with the fountains of the Great Deep, you'd have the, the marine, basically the ocean floor habitats destroyed first, and then as the floodwaters rose, went higher and higher, as far as when the habitats were being destroyed. You'd have other effects. Ability to flee rising floodwaters would affect that. Some animals float if they drown. Some animals sink if they drown. Transitional forms never existed. And then the quality of fossils indicates rapid burial and fossilization. Well, that's now the even the evolutionists have come around saying that you had to when a fossil was formed, it had to be buried very rapidly. But they don't talk about a global flood. They'll just say, well, lots of major floods, but that were big enough to cause the fossils to be extremely well preserved. And so a couple points on the fossil record. And this is, I probably should just go ahead and put the horse series in here, because this was basically, it used to be up in our Smithsonian. I think they took that exhibit out probably 20 years ago, maybe more. But it was the same philosophy. Was you would basically, they were looking at the same kind of animal or the same family, but looking at, in that case, I think it was mainly size, but just they called it the horse series. You can probably still look it up. But the idea would be, rather than saying, hey, those are all horses, they would say, well, maybe this little horse, just evolved into bigger and bigger and bigger horses. And so the analogy would be just like saying, well, is a beagle just a type of dog, or is it a transitional form between a Yorkie and a German Shepherd? And so those are two ways you could look at it. If we didn't have dogs alive today, and all you found were dog bones, well, that would be the discussion. Is it, which is it? Because is it just variation within a kind, or just the incredible diversity that God designed into the original creation? Or would there actually be any kind of, I'd say, information adding evolution going on? Of course, every case, it always ends up being it's just either variation within a kind, or it's a kind of animal that has gone extinct. And so there are obviously kinds of animals that have gone extinct, but also this would just be variation within a kind. And so this is a couple of quotes. These, as far as they know, these are just good scientists. I don't know what their religious affiliation is, but this was Dr. David Pilbeam. He's a paleoanthropologist, PhD from Yale University. He says, I'm also aware of the fact that, at least in my own subject of paleoanthropology, theory, heavily influenced by implicit ideas, almost always dominates data. Ideas that are totally unrelated to actual fossils have dominated theory building, which in turn strongly influence the way fossils are interpreted. So he's basically saying they're like, right now, there's this huge attempt to say that apes turned into humans, or ape-like creatures evolved. They branched off. Some became chimpanzees, some became humans. Well, all the science is piling up against that. And have an excellent book on that. Again, I think he's PhD from Harvard. It's not it's just they're what people would view as credible, and it's just chimps and humans. So again, you're welcome to get as many copies of these books as you want. It was about 2019 when we actually finally mapped the chimp genome. And again, the evidence just keeps piling up against this idea that somehow an ape-like creature turned into chimps and humans. And so, but the prevailing paradigm, which is what he's saying here, would be that no. How else are you going to explain apes and humans? Well, Genesis 1 explains it really well. But if you're not allowed to do that, then you look at, we have to have some idea. So that was the current one. And then transitional forms. This was Dr. Colin Patterson, senior paleontologist, British Museum of Natural History. So he's writing a book about evolution. So he's very, he's writing a book about it, but he didn't have any transitional forms in it. And so apparently he got a question, and his response was, I fully agree with your comments on the lack of direct illustration of evolutionary transitions in my book. If I knew of any, fossil or living, I would certainly have included them. You suggest that an artist should be used to visualize such transformations, but where would he get the information from? I could not honestly provide it, and if I were to leave it to artistic license, would that not mislead the reader? And so that's a very good scientist responding as a good scientist. But the problem is now, especially with AI, you can make anything turn into anything. You can make that, make that chair turn into an iguana. You can, and so And so sure enough, probably even 20 years ago, they started saying, well, they started artistic license, and you would have, um, they'd have footnotes, which was good. So they had, okay, this is what we really found, and this is what we really found, and here's the possible transitions. But they would just show them, and you had to actually read the footnote to realize that that's what they were doing. And so um, that's an issue because a lot of times people are just cramming for a test. They don't read the footnotes. And so, but now, unfortunately, it's probably tending to where they'll just start leaving the footnotes out. So it's going to be, again, our kids, our grandkids are going to see things that look so real. And that's true for AI in general. I mean, because you have a lot of fun with AI now. You make things look so real, but so how do we teach them to, what's real, what's not? Well, obviously what's real is what's in the Bible. And so that's what we're going to have to really drive home. So I'm going to jump to this one, and there's a lot of other examples we could give, but since we only got about 4 minutes left, just want to give an example of how the fossils are interpreted. So this, you think, well, that's 1922. That's a long time ago. What did it matter? Well, 1925 was when there was this, essentially a push to start teaching to our students, to our children, that apes turned into humans. And of course, that was a Scopes trial in 1925, kind of culminated, but it was, and it was kind of a trial set up. They knew they were going to lose the trial, but they were going to, that was part of the chess game to starting to be able to start teaching the idea that apes turned into humans. And so, but this was, some of the evidence was available then. It was a tooth found in February 1922, sent to Dr. Henry F. Osborne, American Museum of Natural History, New York, and he declared, well, that's a human tooth. Okay, so you have a tooth found. And so from that tooth, they started coming up with drawings. And there's actually more elaborate drawings from this. But from that tooth, this was the interpretation that most of the public got to see. So you notice, you see Nebraska man, right? So that's pretty good from a tooth. He's pretty good shape, right? Oops, sorry. Back to, okay, so that's impressive just right there that you know what Nebraska man looks like. Well, we know what weapons he carried. There's his club. We know what livestock he kept. There's the camels. Anybody spot the most impressive thing in that whole picture of what we learned from that tooth? Well, we know what his wife looked like. Okay, so again, it just really drives home and then what's even, true science advances. 1927, they found another tooth, true science that had more bones with it, and it turns out he wasn't even human. This is just an extinct wild pig. Then it got even worse. It was only extinct in Nebraska. That type of pig still exists in South America. But for 5 years, you had this whole caveman craze, just based on, and so we see a lot of that happens today just on different subjects. So again, it did, I'll just say did a lot of damage. And so, so where do we go with all that? I'll go back to, oops, I guess I have to go forward to it. Okay, so as we talked about last week, the whole point is it doesn't matter, at some point, you just want to get a person to objectively consider the Bible. And the Bible's been proven over and over and over again to be God's inerrant word. And we don't need to be, reinterpreting Genesis or saying, well, maybe Genesis isn't correct, but I believe most of the Bible, and on any subject, we just touched on a few of them, that's true. And it really, when you think about true science, is catching up with the Bible. Because a lot of these things, again, 50 years ago, the fact we all look so different, well, that was proof that Adam and Eve couldn't have existed. And then we started getting the science data, and it's like, no, wait, easily in the DNA of a single man, a single woman, the information for all of the physical characteristics of all the people alive today. And so, so again, science is catching up with the Bible, but at some point we just have to just get to the point where someone's willing to objectively consider the Bible. And so, real quick, last week mentioned it also. If someone says, well, okay, you don't believe evolution, they'll probably be a little more insulting. Say, well, you don't believe in science. Well, actually, no, we're the ones that are believing in science. But they say, well, you don't believe the Bible. What do you believe? That's perfect, but don't tell them what you believe. Say, it doesn't matter what I believe. Let's see what the Bible says. And that's, I'll call him out since he's not here. That's what Larry Lawson said to Julie and I. And that's frankly the reason we got baptized, because he wasn't like, Larry's smart guy, brilliant, right? But he wasn't going to say, well, this is what I believe. He said, it doesn't matter what we believe. Let's see what the Bible says. And so get to that point and then just be ready. Like, okay, they might say, well, you don't know what I've done. If I'm too bad to, become a Christian. Well, go to Acts 2. Did they do anything worse than the people that crucified Jesus? Or they say, well, everybody in town knows me. There's no way they're going to let me into their church. Guess what? It's God that adds people to the church. It's not people voting. So again, just be prepared for that great question. Next week, going to turn it back over to Mark. Thank you, Mark, for giving me a little over time both times, and thank you guys for being here. And again, lots of good books up here. Happy to stick around, ask any questions if anybody had any. But thanks again.